get Oliver to do a tech check? That's what I'm asking.
Oliver, are you out there? Oliver, can you hear us? I see you on as a participant.
Yep, I can hear you.
Perfect. So we will hand it to you after our intro, and then we can pass slide control to you if you want to run through it.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. Welcome to IETF 122. You're in Chitlata 3, and this is Ops Area Working Group combined with the Ops Area. And we have quite the agenda in both sections this time. This is a formal IETF meeting. This is the note well. Everything you do say is covered under this. As you participate in the IETF, you come to the mic, you're on mailing lists, your discussions, they're covered under this note well. So you agree to abide by the IETF policies and processes. We do have quite a bit of those policies and processes, things about intellectual property. But one of the more specific and important things, kind of the really note well, is we are a organization of respect, and we should respect each other both here when we come to the mic, as well as on mailing lists. We have ways of anonymously, if you need to, reporting any issues where you feel respect is not being maintained. So we ask that you all focus on the work, focus on the technical, and leave like the ad hominem and anything like that out. And if anything, or if anyone does feel that they have an issue, we have an ombuds team that you can take that to. This is a recorded session. Since COVID, we have been using Meet Echo both remotely, and we have quite the robust set of remote attendees, as well as in the room. So if you have a question, if you would like to join the mic queue, please make sure that you sign in either to the mobile Meet Echo or the full Meet Echo. If you're on the full Meet Echo, make sure your volume is off. And then you can join the queue. You can click the button to join the queue, assuming we haven't locked it for timing reasons. And then you can come to the mic. And this helps us for purposes of recording and knowing who's asking the question. And it's good for both the remote attendees to know who you are as well. We did publish the agenda, and we obeyed the typical timelines this time. So the agenda has been up there. We've had the materials up there as well. And if you need to report issues, there's the URL for that. I am Joe Clark, joined with me since last time. I like to feel as always. He's a great partner, is Benoit Claes. Thank you for being here. We will be watching Zulip, the Jabber. Now that we have this new Meet Echo bot that can do slides, we don't have to worry about keeping one laptop always in Meet Echo, so we can do that and bring any questions that you might want to ask in Jabber up. But we would appreciate anyone helping out with the minutes. I think I saw Rob come in the room. Yes, he knows where I'm going with this. We would appreciate that. I haven't had a chance, I forgot, let me put it that way, to post the agenda in the Hedge doc, but we can do that. And anyone, it's all that link right there, the Hedge doc, anyone can edit that. So we would appreciate that. And Rob, would you mind? He's so good. I love this guy. Thank you, Rob. But anyone can jump in and supplement adding to the minutes. The chat room is part of Meet Echo, part of the full tool if you need, but there's also the Zulip link if you need that as well. And again, we're using Meet Echo. We've been a very busy working group. This is good. Since last time, we have 2 new RFCs published, 9740 and 9710, or 9710 and 9740, on various IP fix changes, information elements for TCP options, and IPv6 extension headers, and the simple fixes, which turned out to be not so simple. So we appreciate appreciate the dedication of the authors, editors, and the working group in moving that forward. But that's not all. In the RFC editor queue, we've got a slew of work that is progressing and moving forward. And again, there's been a lot of mailing lists back and forth. The authors have been very responsive here, and this is fantastic stuff. But that's for our area directors and the RFC editors to sort out for now, authors and RFC editors. Where you come in, I look out amongst all of you, is we have 4 documents right now in various states of working group last call. Please, please, please read these drafts and comment as much as you can. Even if you read them and you say, wow, this is the best thing I've ever read, this is ready, the mailing list would like to hear that. If you think that you've read it, you feel that it's well written, it serves its purpose, it's ready to move forward to IESG for publication, please comment on the list. Thank you, Giuseppe, out there, for agreeing to be the shepherd for IP Fix on path telemetry. Med, thank you for TACX TLS. I'm on secure TACX Yang and probably data collection manifest as well. And then there's plenty of other working group items. Don't just read the working group last call. Yes, please read them. Those are more urgent, so to speak. But we also have 12 other drafts that are working group items that we would love some feedback on list. So keep those discussions going. With that, we have some other work that Benoit has been busy talking to all of the authors on, and he'd like to give an update.
All right, very good. So the first one is the PCAP1. So we're still waiting for an IPR declaration from Guy. I spoke with Michael Richardson, who's going to try to contact Guy directly. If you are online, Guy, feel free to reply with the IPR statement, and we would be able to progress the document. The second one, this is the guideline for characterization OAM. So Joe, if you want to load the specific slide that Adrian prepared for this. So some background on this while Adrian comes to the stage is that I've been as a new chapter reviewing the document, and we wanted to understand from the author what his status is. And thank you, Adrian, for preparing something yesterday evening.
Yeah, this is Adrian. Thank you for kicking me, actually, because otherwise I really wouldn't have done it. Yeah, so where we are with this, we had a working group last call on -03. Some issues were raised and we resolved them with the people who commented and posted an 04. And then 3 further reviews came in after working group last call was completed. That's okay. All reviews are good reviews. So this was Greg, Tim, as I think
Upstairs,
yeah, and Benoit as the incoming shepherd. And I feel that these raise fundamental issues about what the scope of the document should be. So Carlos has taken a stab at answering Tim's review and making some suggestions of how to go forward. We need to close that loop with Tim. As an editor, I'm not sure how to go forward when the working group has said good to go, and now the reviewers are saying, yeah, but the scope content is wrong. There are also some editorials, including from Med, that are outstanding, and I think we're just reluctant to make those changes until we understand where we're going with the document. We have done some outreach to other working groups, basically by sending mails to the list post working group last call update. So basically saying, here's the 04, please look at this because it affects you. And Greg also, as shepherd, sent a couple of those, trying to draw out more comments. This all leaves me with 4 questions I think need to be resolved. We don't have to do it now here in this meeting, but have people been keeping up with this document and read the 04 version? who thinks we actually need a draft on this at all? Maybe it's time to say, look, we've discussed this round and we're done. Let's move on. Should we reduce the scope, have the document, but reduce the scope as some of the comments have been? Or should we take the document right the way back and do editing changes, keeping the scope sort of the same, but fixing it?
Right. So some more background on this. So yeah, that's a difficult document because there's a lot of history. Whenever we discuss with the chairs and the idea was that, okay, we have an incoming shepherd. We also have the ops directorate to get a broader view. And the plan with Mahesh was to say it would be worth to just present it in all the different working groups there. And I know it's painful, right? But just to see if there is like not only the view of this working group, but the view of all the other working group telling yes or no. So unless Mahesh want to add something, maybe we're thinking that the main question here is one that Joe has been preparing. Do you want to read it? Oh, okay. It's in there. Who thinks we should go ahead with some draft on this topic? Because I understand even from you and from somehow the lack of reply that there's some fatigue with this document. So do we have the energy and should we be working on this? That's the main question here. Mahesh, I don't know if you want to say something as background.
Mahesh. So actually, I thought maybe we should let maybe Greg, he's in the queue, say what he has in mind before.
Okay, sorry, I missed Greg.
No, that's okay. Actually, you already expressed recommendation that I was about to say. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely what, sorry?
Encourage, come to the working groups. I understand that it might be frustrating and might be time consuming, but at least come to IPPM working group. And I believe that it will be possible to ask for a time slot. I don't know if you will be ready to do it tomorrow when IPPM working group session is. I will try to support. I will support. Okay, I will support this. If proponents of this draft think that they can do it on a short notice. But sending emails, yeah, I understand. Sometimes group is not that responsive, especially when it's brought up not to person directly, but to the working group as community. You get usually like a stone soup.
Now here is a question, because the draft is in version 04, but out of the 3 reviews that you had, you're still missing to address 2 of them, right? The incoming shepherd and the ops directorate. So.
And actually Greg's review.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so all 3 of those.
Okay, that's right, yes.
Sorry, Greg, just one quick clarification. I know there were a whole list of working groups that were listed for the authors to go and present. Is IPPM really the only one? Would be enough, or?
That's a good question. I would say that if I had to choose one group, I would recommend to go to IPPM, because I understand it's time consuming to go to many, but IPPM, in my opinion, probably is the outmost group tied to this terminology, and where a lot of terminology that this draft proposes to change have been used for quite some time and actually defined. If we look at RFC 7799, which this draft proposes to modify terminology defined in 7799, was published by IPPM working group. So for that, I think that IPPM is a must. Everything else is optional.
So question for you, Adrian. Is that something you're willing to do?
No. Not because I don't think it should be done. It's just I'm not willing to do it. So there are 7 people I see from this survey who are willing to do it. Well, that's a bit of a stretch, but there are 7 people who think we should have some draft on this topic. I wonder whether any of those would like to take up the reins of pushing it. I'm happy to continue as an editor. I'm also happy to be replaced. But I'm not happy to go around championing this and having these discussions. I'm too old.
I was going to add, well, I'll wait, Thomas, for you to answer, then I'll ask my question.
Right. So as I'm about to get IPPM chair and we have lightning sessions there, I could maybe squeeze some time out. I need to clarify with Marcus whether this is possible, but at least you could present a document there. We could ask a similar question like here, whether there are people at IPPN interested to contribute to the document, and we could take it from there. What do you think?
I appreciate that offer, and I think it's great to make time for it, but you said you could, and yes, I could, but I won't.
Just like present the document, the current discussion at the lightning session at IPPM, and we could ask this question: who could help and contribute to the document?
So what about this? So I understand your point of view, Adrian, and we're not going to put more pressure on you. What if, as shepherd, I would go to IPPM, so not drinking too much tonight, and just ask this question, and I'm not going to present the slide. I'm going to ask the same question there and potentially answer a question or two, but not representing the document. If there is like the exact reverse from here, maybe we have the answer. If there is the exact same answer here, maybe we will find someone with more energy to help. Sounds like a plan?
Sure, sure.
I don't expect an answer, but there, to Adrian's point, there are 7 people who raised their hand that says this should move forward in some form. Are any of those 7 people willing to take up a mantle to present? Because my fear is, if it's just this question asked in IPPM, I don't know how many people in IPPM have read this, and there might not be much of an answer, meaning some introduction is probably needed. And if you don't want to answer here, that's fine, I get it, but we would, if you are interested, we would, as chairs, like to know that, and if there's something you can do now, like Thomas said, go to the IPPM or do a lightning talk, please let us know, either right now at the mic or come up to us and see us. But we would need to see that I guess at this point, we need that active type of participation to move this forward.
Thank you. So if you go back to the previous set of slides, the third document is on MUD, and MUD I spoke with Michael Richardson again. So there is right now a discussion on updating the IoT Ops charter to include MUD. So Michael is actually proposing that this third document, the MUD one, would be moved directly to IoT Ops whenever this is like approved. So for us, the ADs and the authors can choose.
Mahesh speaking as an AD. Yeah, I think if the authors want to move this to IoT Ops, and I think they probably will get more and better review in that working group, I would be happy if the authors want to move it to that working group.
Thank you.
Well, we are way behind right now, but hopefully you've had a chance to see some of the agenda before, but we do want to offer an opportunity for people to bash this. So we've got some topics that are adopted. We've got some topics that are not adopted, but might be very interesting to the working group. And then we have, like I said, quite the robust set of ops area topics, 2 of them, which is usually rare. We usually maybe get 1. Is there anyone who would like to bash this agenda? Not seeing anyone. No one coming from remote. Oliver, you ready?
I am, yep.
All right, coming at you.
All right, cool. Okay, getting started. Yeah, this is an update from the prefix length draft. This is joint work together with Randy, Massimo, and Russ. So what is this draft all about? It's about services wanting to know the width of an IP address space used by a customer. This could be used, for example, for block listing or throttling purposes, or also in rate limiting or capture scenarios, so that you are not blocked because your neighboring IP address is being blocked, for example. And that's why we introduced the notion of prefix length files. So these specify a customer's assignment size. And the technical concept is very similar to that of geofeeds. The networks adopting this would benefit by publishing these files, as it reduces the collateral damage to their customers. So how does an example prefix length file look like? So these are CSV files. And the first field, as you can see here, specifies the prefix in CIDR notation. And the second field specifies the allocation size within that prefix. Meaning that, for example, in the first example, the allocation size within that prefix is a /56 within that /32. Now, if you do this, of course, you have to take longest prefix matching into account. For example, here, the second entry, the /48 prefix, would need to be matched if the IP address would fall into this prefix and not the first entry, of course. This draft also has a feature for handling carrier-grade NAT deployments. So in this example here, we have a /24 IPv4 prefix, and we would want to signal that a customer is part of a carrier-grade NAT, which would then be signaled as a virtual /40 prefix that is allocated instead of no, it just goes to /32, but it's a /40, which is being calculated as the prefix length plus the binary logarithm over the number of CGN end sites. So in this example, it's a /24 prefix with 65,536 end sites, which is 2 to the power of 16. So you just add 24 plus 16, which ends up being 40 in this case. How do you signal the presence of these prefix length files? As I already said, this is very similar concept as with geofeeds. So this is published within the WHOIS database as part of the INetNum class. And there are multiple ways of how to do it. Initially, it will be the remarks field will be used, as can be seen here. There is the first alternative being a dedicated prefix length attribute being introduced, and the second alternative, which defines a more generic way of signaling the presence of external references. And the same principles also would apply to RDAP. There is also an optional signature mechanism for authentication, which makes use of RPKI. Massimo was kind enough to create a prototype of the prefix length finder, which will then be able to go through the WHOIS database and identify all prefix length files, similar as the geofeed finder. where there are, of course, some further considerations which need to be taken into account. For example, the data could simply be inaccurate, which is in prefix length file. This could be on purpose or by mistake. So it is wise to only take those prefix length files from networks that you trust. An attacker could also use prefix length files to better focus DDoS or other attack traffic towards a specific customer, because they then know the boundary of that specific customer. And internet scanners could also use prefix length files to improve, for example, their IPv6 scanning reconnaissance, because they then know where specific customers might be allocated at. And finally, what are the updates since the last IETF regarding this draft? So this draft has been adopted as a working group draft. We've expanded the security considerations based on feedback that we received on the mailing list, and also fixed a single typo. That's all from my side. Happy to answer any questions or receive comments. Thank you.
John.
Yeah, thank you. I think this draft is good, and it's about 99% of the way ready to go. And just, totally by coincidence, I wrote an almost identical draft at the same time these guys did, because I had been talking to large operators of mail systems, and I said, why don't you do V6? And the answer is because we can't tell where the boundaries are. You know, so this is, so I asked them, it's like I looked at this draft, I said, if you had something like this, would that help? And they said, yes, definitely. I mean, so I'm not sure it's useful for V4, but it is at worst harmless. And for V6, it's very useful. And I have a couple of minor nits. I mean, I think the way that you encode CGNAT is too clever. I would just add another column that says how big, you know, what factor they're overloaded by, or something like that. And for security considerations, I would add a comment saying that you could use this for the what's known as the fake bad customer thing, like, oh well, that spam was from a bad customer who we fired, whereas in fact they don't have customers. It's all the same people. But again, those are nits. This is basically ready.
Thanks, John. Oliver, can you go back to your further consideration slide, because the I thought about the DDoS thing. The IPv6 scanning is interesting, but you say further considerations, and I appreciate John's comments on being 99% done. But my question to you is, what are your next steps with respect to these further considerations?
So the further considerations, these are maybe it's kind of a mix of. So I would say these are the security considerations that we added since the last IETF. So these are not kind of the next steps in a sense. It's just what you need to consider if you were to implement the prefix length draft in your own network, or would publish it in WHOIS as an operator.
Okay, so John, could you please put your nits and whatnot on the list if you haven't? I don't think I've seen it. And Oliver, then what would your next steps be? If you address some of his comments, are there any other outstanding things that you think this needs?
Not from my perspective, no.
Then we can maybe consider this then for once you're addressed pending comments from John, a working group last call on this. But given these detailed security considerations, I think one of our next steps will be to get it to the security directorate and get a review on that. Thanks.
Sounds good.
Okay, we bought ourselves a little bit of time. Thank you, Oliver, for presenting.
Thank you.
Bought ourselves maybe a few seconds. Who is next? Export of delay performance. Without further delay.
Great, thanks. So as you're aware of, we passed the working group last call. We are moving forward to ISG, and we have a document shepherd, Giuseppe, thanks a lot. In the last version, we incorporated some input from Paul, Menachem, and Martin. which are just editorial, but will help to move the document forward. Thanks a lot. Due to, let's say, the normative dependencies we had with the ORM characterization document, we removed that dependency and we defined the ORM terms directly in the document, in the -16 release. And with that, I think we addressed all the open items. Are there any questions or remarks?
Not seeing any, so I think at this point we can, another one we can probably move forward then with some reviews, direct reviews into the last call.
Absolutely. Good. Thanks.
Wow, that was quick, really?
Yep.
Okay. I think we're back on schedule.
Good.
Thank you, Thomas. Alternate marking.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. This is an update about the IPFix alternate marking information elements. I'm presenting on behalf of the co-authors. So next.
Yep, you have next.
Yeah, sorry. Jet lag. This slide showed a quick recap about the scope of the draft. So we are just requesting IANA to create new elements under the IPFix information element registry. Just a clarification, with alternate marking, each node need to export data each period for the monitoring flow. And it's needed the combination of already existing information elements and just few new information elements that we are requesting to add. The existing information elements for flow identification that we are going to reuse are, of course, source address, destination address, protocol, and ports. The new information elements, according to the RFC 9343, are the flow monitor identification, loss flag, delay flag, and period number that are defined in the document. So the latest changes from 01 to 02, we thank Paul for the useful inputs as IPFix expert. So we clarify that each IPFix subregistry contains value for single information elements. Therefore, we don't need to create a new registry. So in addition, no designated expert is needed. So experts are only required when future additional values are anticipated, and we also address this point. We also clarify the difference between the flow monitor identification and the flow label ID of the IP flow. So we want to keep them separated to avoid overlapping, because they can be used for other purposes and simultaneously. And we also added few editorial changes. Yeah, I know that the queue for working group last call is quite long, but anyway, this draft is quite stable and we hope we can move it forward. Also, the companion documents in IPPM are progressing at the same time, both the deployment draft and the Young model. So in order to complete the whole, let's say, manageability aspect of the method. That's all. Comments are welcome.
Mahesh speaking as a contributor. This is more of an over question, something that came out of the AnyMops workshop also. Can other monitoring protocols such as IPFix and BMP harmonize on the schema that is used to provide a consistent view of the data that is being exported?
I think that it's quite separated. So because this is more for live monitoring, for data plane live monitoring. So I don't think.
If I may. So yeah, BMP control plane, this one is data plane. So not really the same field, but the goal is about to try to get, if possible, the same data model between the three planes. I've got some feedback. So this is a general feedback for many of the IPFix, and I'm glad to have a new life for IPFix these days. So we don't need a standard track document to have IPFix information elements, because the IPFix IANA registry is expert review. However, it's not bad that we have a document, but it means that the use cases must be maybe better described, because this is the value of the document. So for example, when I read your document, you have like 4 fields. Okay, there is like the flow ID that you discussed a little bit. But for example, I don't see the link between the draft that Thomas just presented, which is a delay, right? You just have a delay flag. But how are you going to use it? Is this for every single packet? Is this, so just telling this could be used for, so the different use cases and how to use that. And on top of that, whenever you've got key fields already in IPFix, then the correlation with the flow ID, which is set by someone else. I mean, this is where I would see the value of this document to be on a track to explain the operational aspect of it.
No, thank you for highlighting this point. As I said in this slide, there are the alternate marking implies several different documents. In particular, there is a companion document on the deployment draft in IPPM, that is the one mentioned in this slide, and where we presented all the, let's say, the manageability aspect of the alternate marking. Of course, the use of flowmon ID, loss flag, delay flag, let's say, imply that you are familiar with the alternate marking methodology, but of course, if you want, we can add more applicability scenarios, use case description inside this draft in order to make it complete, if you think it's more useful. Otherwise, we can just add the reference to the relevant document, but maybe if you prefer to have a use case description.
It's not my preference.
No, I mean,
I'm thinking 2 possible outcomes. The first one is that you've got your deployment in a different draft, and the only thing you need is from IANA to just have the code point, and you could describe this deployment. Or if you want a separate draft, then maybe you want to explain more than just 4 bullet points.
Okay, you mean to merge this draft with the deployment draft? Okay, no problem. Yeah, it's not a problem. Yeah. Because let's say the deployment draft, it's described both use of IPFix, YANG and YANG push, and it refers to the IPFix document, to the YANG document, to the YANG push documents, that are separated. But if you want, we can incorporate only the IPFix part in the deployment draft. So it's up to.
Let's take it offline. We'll see.
I don't have any preference. So
I think in general, what Benoit was saying, we've got a lot of these IPFix documents coming forward, and Ops area work group, we're actually talking about a recharter and kind of focusing that as an example. It'd be good from an operational standpoint to understand how what you're doing is going to be used operationally in the document, so that people who look at this can get a little bit more context of what was the intent here.
I will do that. Maybe this is I will write a new section on the scenario use case and to describe how to use these new fields. Maybe there will be just some repetition with other draft, but it's not a problem. Just to be more exact. Thank you.
Hey everyone, good. Shall I start?
Please.
Yep. Thank you. So hey everyone, good day. So this is regarding the export of GPRS tunneling protocol user plane information in IPFix. So we are currently in the 3rd version of the working group adopted draft. So since IETF 21, these were the set of updates. So a liaison statement was issued with 3GPP 2 different working groups, TSG SA working group 5 and TSG CT working group 4, to be able to review this document and provide any comments on top of that. Additionally, on top of the version 1 and 2, we had some comments from MED, and those were updated. Those were related to updating the IETF descriptions and also giving some cross references in the use case section 4. related to slicing related information. So those were being updated. And moving further, so the description has been updated. These are the set of information elements which are present. So for the sake of reference, it's been captured in this slide. Moving further, what are the set of open comments in version 03? We had a couple of set of comments and all of them has been addressed except for these two. So these two are related to having a separate information element defined for exposing the extension header chain of the GTPU packet, and also be able to export a length of the GTPU packet given that the GTPU is a variable header length. So these two are the latest comments that are being discussed in the working group. In this, one part related to the peer tunnel endpoint has been discussed and closed. So we'll continue the discussions on the other two, and we'll probably try to close it in a week or two. So the discussions are going on. So we'll continue that and in the group, and then come to a consensus on that. What are the next steps? We'll be updating the INI registry also with the updated descriptions in the draft, so that we'll follow it up and do it. And also the outstanding comments from MED related to having a new information elements on the version 03. That is something we'll discuss in the group and close it. And we'll also accordingly update the 04 version also. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Thanks, Ram. Very succinct. Comments? I think we've got a good path forward on this, but does anyone have any comments on the GTPU work? Oh, not seeing anything. Thank you, Shriram.
Thank you.
I was not sure, and we don't want to push. Okay, so do we have the? So the idea is to give an update on this draft that are basically related to the availability of reference implementation that has allowed us to do two things. One is that all the examples of how signatures can be made in the different enclosing methods are available for JSON and XML. We are still working on the CBOR coding. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, that has allowed us as well to add an implementation status section in version 6, in which what we are doing is precisely providing information and links to this reference implementation. There are a few things that are still open. There was Alex made a comment some time ago on why this was informational and not on the standards track. This is something that is open. I have received some comments of COSI experts about the canonicalization mechanisms that we had to review. I had to read it carefully. We were very much focused on the implementation aspects, and this is something that we had to sort out. And while taking advantage of this implementation, we are working on other integration patterns, because we have found that through not so complicated redesign of how we have built this should be applicable in other cases. Like, for example, the integration with PubSub mechanisms, that probably is the most important thing in terms of what we are the goals in this group. In principle, we are considering, since the adding and closing methods doesn't seem that complicated, taking into account the design, we are considering others just in case, and we are specifically having a look at how Jan push light is evolving, just to address it. Right now, we are working with the enclosing method that is focused on Jan notifications, and the idea is that as Jan push light consolidates, to go and put a way of signing them. The code, as I said, is a first reference implementation, which is fairly complete, with the exception that it is not doing CBOR yet. Is implemented in Java, and we have made some initial experiments of integrating it with some young modules and suites. We want to explore this in more detail, and in particular, something that we are looking in detail is the approach using Kafka, because it's a very natural place to deploy this. We demonstrated this at the hackathon using a microservice serverless approach, just to simplify the possibility of throwing different fragments and showing some results. What we are planning as for other mechanisms for integration based on the on the software is not, but this is the most immediate one, and you have them. This is the URL in which they will be, these methods will be available at least during the week. I cannot guarantee that will be there forever, because that's machine. This Kafka Exa is something that we use for experiments, and is part of our fight with our IT department about opening ports and things like that. So I managed to get it open for this week. If you're interested, should be straightforward. If you decide to play with it and doesn't work, let me know. If you play with it and it works, please let me know as well. And if not, I will be around, so we can discuss about it. The code is available on GitHub. The containers used for this are available in Docker Hub, just for you to play. Or to play and to use it, even, which is even more than that. So what comes later is that, well, the experience on preparing the hackathon and the discussion at the hackathon made us think about some changes in the reference implementation itself to redesign it in a way that would be easier. That integration I was talking about. We want to complete the approach with the issue of the canonicalization, the issues regarding the integration, and specifically about push light. Thinking about additional enclosing methods, if that would be the case. CBOR is there, and that's the idea, is to keep a full alignment between the draft and the reference implementation. So at the end, we have something that evolves in parallel. And if our IT department allows us to keep a reference set of microservices that is available for whoever wants to make a test. And with this, well, as usual, we have now an implementation. We have, you have here the possibility of playing with it. And so we think that things are mature, or reasonably mature for adoption. That's and that's all.
Thank you, Diego, and thank you very much for the hackathon. Question to you, clarifying question. So I see an adoption once you have an implementation available, but you do have, or maybe you mean one that has the complete approach?
No, yeah, probably I was not clear, and this is very likely a problem with my Spanish thinking translating into English. Is that would be now that we have? Is that in Spanish you translate once for una vez, and that implies that it's now that we have. Sorry about that.
So clearly you're asking for adoption.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. I am. Yes. I'm sorry.
Relax, everything is fine.
So, oh, sorry. We've got a poll. I love the excitement, man. Yes, and canonicalization.
Thank you.
Who in this room and on remote feels that this is work that they are interested in adopting here in OPSAWG?
Come on, I forgot my phone.
Your excitement comes through. Things have stabilized-ish. We have overwhelmingly of those who have voted. We have 50 participants, so not an overwhelming number of total. 12 say yes, 1 no, 3 no opinion. I don't know if the 1 no feels comfortable to say why not, why this work might not be worth taking on. You don't have to. Obviously, nothing here is binding. We would take this to the list for an adoption standpoint. But of the people who are, shouldn't say voting, of the people who are responding, we have 14 to say yes. So I think you've been here a few times. You've done some real work in the hackathon. I think my personal opinion is it's worth at least putting it up to the list.
Perfect. Thank you. So am I dismissed? Yes. I hope so.
I don't see anyone coming to the queue. So yes.
Jean, you're next with the data manifest for contextualized telemetry.
Hello. So yes, these are the updates on the data manifest draft. Next, please.
Next is you. We've given you control.
It's me. Oh, great.
You have the power.
Wow. So we had some review from the last call, and thank you very much for the review. This is very helpful. So one change that we did is to rename the module that was previously called the Data Collection Manifest Statistics to YP for Young Push current period. And it now has its dedicated section. Yes, there is a typo in the module. It's written the only node that is added is read write, but it should be read only. So this has been fixed in the next version to be published that is not published yet. We also removed the use for the schema mount because we dropped support of SemVer. So now we can just reuse the grouping from Young library. So we don't need to use the schema mount anymore for the platform manifest. For the data collection manifest, we really need the schema mount, and some commands indicated that it's not possible to use this design time feature. I mean, to make like use Young schema mount with design time schema. So the suggestion was to move it to an example. So this is what we did. So now the collection manifest is an example. We also worked on the comments about the mapping between the collected data that we have in the let's say time series database and how it should be mapped to the actual data manifest corresponding, meaning if I see a value 42 from my counter, how do I map it to the way it was collected, to the data collection context? So this has been also rewritten so that it's hopefully more clear. And finally, we've added the command to validate the example, even though there was a typo in the JSON that somehow passed the Young Lead validation. But this is the command to validate the examples that we have in the draft. And we have added the security and YANA consideration according to the templates according to the latest version of the template. We finally, maybe the most important, we have some question about whether we should focus more on the usability on the module, which for me means align with the Young catalog, so that whenever we get a data manifest from an old Young module that we don't have the device anymore, we can go on the Young catalog to retrieve the corresponding Young module, or to facilitate with the implementation and align with the existing modules that have the characteristics of the software and hardware of the platform. So yeah, so it would be nice to have any feedback on this question. And that's it.
Rob is in the queue.
I want to check I'm talking about the Rob Wilson. I want to check I'm talking about the right. This is one that's in working group last call, is that right?
Yes, it
Yeah.
was. There was, it was protracted, I think, because there was some comments, but then I think, Jean, there was some email issues, but he's responded since then.
So Benoit, I think you referenced this document in one of the interims maybe, or in terms of talking about this document in terms of reviewing it when we're discussing collection and things like that. So I had a quick look at it and it wasn't clear to me, I haven't read it necessarily that well, whether it's the devices that are expected to be publishing this data or whether it gets added on by the collector or not. So that was one of my questions. If it's coming from the devices, I think most of this data can be available elsewhere in the Yang schema. So it's like a duplication of that data potentially, and I guess you're putting it together. And then the last comment is in terms of the draft that Thomas presented, I think it was Thomas presented earlier in NMOP. So that one had a context that was adding on to the Yang push telemetry. So that again seemed very similar. And Thomas said it was resharing some of those definitions. So again, how do these all fit together? I had that question. So sorry.
All right, very good. So let me address a couple of the comments, and Jean, feel free to add this as a contributor. So this draft was created maybe a couple of years ago when we're trying to do the same thing as the data mesh, where we need to get the context of the information. So whenever we arrive in a time series database, we need to understand that something changed for a device, because the machine learning expert who's looking at time series are going to see a long time series, exactly like Thomas is looking in NMOP this morning. But if you don't know, something has changed. So initially, yes, we're thinking that the device could be sending this information. However, the collector, if he's got the information, could be aggregating this information and sending back, exactly like the draft from NMOP by Ahmed this morning, telling from the collector, I need to send across my Kafka or my broker the information that is giving the context of the information. So now I fully agree that we start to have information in different places and even in different formats. The two of us, we wrote the Yang module for the Yang catalog, and we were scratching our heads on getting, if I take a simple Cisco device, the show version, how do we put all the feature set, the name and all this? There is no good way because it's not standardized across the industry. So the question here is that, yes, there is a software and a hardware. It would be ideal to link those if those IETF are implemented. So these are all the questions that we have. And yes, we know the goal. And I agree with you that at some point in time with Ahmed, we'll need to agree on which fields we put. But if you want to say it's a Cisco router with that iOS version and it's XR, and it's got this feature set or this license, how do we do this? This is the work that was done also with the license where we're trying to do the same thing. It was too complex.
So to summarize, you saying that effectively, because I think all the data will be there in Yang models somewhere. This is just providing a simpler way to pull the relevant data together and make it easy to query.
And push it, streaming along with the data, yes.
So the streaming along the data bit, I'm not so keen on. So that's what I'd sort of question more as to whether it should be done by the device or should be added on by the collector. So I think there's always a question where this data belongs. So then the last question, I still don't know quite how this draft fits with Thomas's, as in, do they heavily overlap? Do you need both of them? Or what's the bit that's different between the two?
There is an overlap in the goal.
Yep.
How we're going to do it, we could decide. Is this like a push? Is this a query? Is this done by the collector? All this comes into more into the data mesh, the broker architecture, and how we're going to do it. So no good answer for you now. We'll see where the industry will go.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer Rob's question, I think the main difference is here we are streaming the data along, while with the document which Ahmed presented, we are actually augmenting the messages with the data, but the content on both documents is the same, more or less.
But then would it be better to have one document that just covers both those use cases rather than having two separate documents? As in, if it's the same data structure or very, very similar, do we need two RFCs?
Let me rephrase. So there is a part of Ahmed's document which is about the manifest part. However, there is other parts of the document which is augmenting all the data. From an implementation point of view, I think it's better to have one document describing what the data collection should do and what's the interface towards the Kafka. However, we will have, or I have to check whether we already have a normative reference to the data manifest, where we are referencing that manifest part to this document here.
Okay.
Alex from Insight, I think I can answer some of your mismatching here. This was one of my comments during the working group last call, that some of the bits of this data manifest can be reused in other drafts. So I asked Jean to aggregate those in a grouping. I haven't got still time to send a comment on the draft from Ahmed, but my comment from there was that maybe on the Ahmed draft should import this and use the grouping that is defined already in this one. And for me, in that way, you should remove the overlapping thing.
Right, so that there was actually this problem that there wasn't a grouping which we could reuse. That's why we redefined that. But we want
exactly, but this has been solved on the last iteration.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you, Jean. I think Benoit and I are going to talk about maybe there's some more collaboration now with NMOP that needs to happen on this particular work, but we'll talk about that and bring stuff back to the list.
Thank you.
John, here, remote? Oh, remote.
Hi, afternoon, everyone. I'll just check, can you hear me okay?
We can, you sound good. We
Great.
see you as well.
Excellent. So in the last meeting, we had a discussion around information models versus data models and how we represent them. On this slide, I'm just trying to cover through, and it hasn't come out very well, just through the history of what we've done with this draft. So in 0001, we presented just an information model on packet discard reporting, and it was just as a tree, and we were looking for what's the right way to represent an information model. Med gave us the pointer that we could use Yang and abstract it from the implementation, which we hadn't realized. We did that in 02. Then I think there was the proposal that we take that rather than being an informational RFC, we target standards-based, a standards track. That gave rise to 03 and 04, which is still information model with Yang. And then the feedback from the last meeting was that didn't make sense to have an information model specified in that way on its own. We needed the information model and the data model combined in a single document, which we did, which we have done in this version. So that's the substantive change in this version, is that we've got the information model expressed in Yang, the data model derived from the information model, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the data model in this case. Now, the fact that we've got a document defining information model in Yang and data model doesn't preclude the fact that we could have another data model expressed in another way, and I'll touch on that. And sorry for the rendering. Okay, so the information model, as it's expressed in the current document, has 4 top-level components. And these are essentially different entities that could, under which we could report packet loss and do report packet loss. So top one is the control plane. So these are discards to and from the control plane processes. Second, interface, obviously interface discards. Third, flow level discards, and last, device. So in some cases we can have some platforms, we can have discards where at the point where they're dropped, they're not associated with flows or interfaces, and so they appear like a box level entity discard. So in the information model, we've tried to cover each of these possibilities. And in the data model in the draft, we have explicitly covered two of those top level components. So interface level discards and device level discards. So we've done a essentially lossless transformation from the Yang information model to a Yang data model for interface level and device level discards. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a slide or two. What we've also done is submitted another draft, which takes the information model and expresses that in terms of an IPFix information element. And I will talk about that in the follow-on slides. So, because we had a lot of discussion over the last couple of meetings around this, wanted to confirm with the working group that we're happy with the approach and that where we've landed. So the approach that we're on at the moment is the one that we see to the left. So we've got one draft which expresses an information model for discard reporting across all of those possible components, and a specific data model that addresses the discards at the interface level and device level. Then we've got a follow-on draft in this case, which references the same information model, but it defines the discards for an information element for IPFix to capture the discard classification at the flow level. Okay. The alternative way that we could do this, and just speaking conceptually, is that we could have an information model draft and then data model drafts that follow that reference the information model draft. And I think from an author perspective, I think we're comfortable with both. Leave it to discussion to the group to try and understand where we land. Where we're currently at is with the approach on the left. Any
Do you
questions?
have a strong preference? You say you're comfortable with either one. Which would you prefer as author?
I think there's the approach to the right, just in terms of a pure document perspective, feels a bit cleaner. You know, forgetting processes, just because we've separated out the concerns. On the other hand, I think it is also useful to have the data model as an example of the information model. It's it's really a true expression of the information model. So and I understand there's also issues to do with how we maintain these things over time. So I don't think I think logically the right-hand side is a little bit cleaner, but I think we can work with either approach.
Rob?
I'm going to suggest a third alternative, which is to put them all into one document. So just take one on the left and go a bit further. So have a section for doing the information model in Yang, the data model in Yang, and the IPFix one as well, and then just have them all in one place.
Hadn't thought of that one. We could do that one. That's a combination of these two.
John, the question I'm asking myself is, if you need to update something, it would most likely be the 3 documents on the right. So the proposal by Rob might be the most pragmatic one, no? Because we discussed last time the issue of maintaining the information model.
Yeah.
If you change information model, you have to change the data models. So maybe just one document.
My opinion was I like the thing on the left more, but I don't necessarily mind Rob's suggestion either. I think practically, I go back to the comment I think you made last time, Benoit, about people want the API. The data model, I think, and the implementations thereof, like IPFix, will be the most useful. So I don't think the information model by itself would probably be touched all that much. But if it did, then yes, cascading from that up, having one document would make things cleaner.
I guess the only counterpoint would be we're creating a sort of big monolithic document, which then let's imagine that we create a new data model in future. Do we end up putting it back into the same document and revisiting that, or does that become something new in its own right? And do we end up delaying again because we're kind of going through another cycle of review of the new bit that
How frequently do you want to change your information model?
I don't think it's not necessarily that we want to change the information model frequently. I think the information model is pretty, mature. Let's say it's if we get a new expression of the data model, I think.
Just a comment on this. Normally, and I know that probably I'm going to say something that could sound heretic in the terms of what is the information modeling, etc. But my understanding, in many cases, information models are a higher level explanation of the data model. Is very, for sure, you can. It's possible that someone or you can decide to make a new data model based on this information model, but this, should, in my view, should be quite unlikely. So I fully support this idea of having a single model document with the information model, and as a natural flow, you create the data model. Somehow, in some cases, we have this as well. In some documents in the IETF and some models, but what we don't have is a formal information model built in. What we have is a description, and the description is an information model, informal. So it would be the way we have done this in the past, basically.
Any more questions?
Not seeing anyone else at the mic. Rob's coming back.
So was there any more questions on this specific issue or on the document general?
Either way.
Either way. So sorry, I looked at this document earlier today. I will send some review comments. I've got some relatively minor ones on it. I can just say them here. I'll try to put them in an email as well. It might be useful to use or look at something like counter 64 potentially that's used in the interface model that's just a slightly more refined type than uint 64. It has some extra sort of semantics embedded. That would be one suggestion. Two, I would suggest you think carefully about defining 32-bit counters. Maybe for packet ones, that might be okay. For byte ones, I would suggest you just don't do that. Just because they'll overflow so quickly. But even for the error counters, I wonder nowadays whether it's worth having the complexity of having both types, because we've had in the past, we've done 32-bit counters and had to upgrade them 64-bit for high-speed interfaces.
Yeah, we had that explicit request the other way, which is why we went that way, which was that given the plethora of counters, 64-bit for all of those in practice wasn't, for some of those things like the error counters, packet level error counters, both wasn't commonly supported in hardware and wasn't required. So yeah, I don't know what the generic guidance is. We could certainly put in 64-bit, but I think then the question is that realistic?
And then the last thought I had is in terms of the implementing the data model for the devices, there's obviously some of these counters are already defined, or many of them are be defined in vendor-specific data models, but also in the standard models have some of these. And one of the things you're trying to align here is in terms of definitions. I wonder whether are we missing something of not trying to fix and refine some of the existing definitions to get them more precise? You think it's just too painful to go that direction?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it's too painful, but I think also it's if you look at some of the nuance, for example, and you look at how some of the mistakes that have been made on the implementations that exist, something like IFIN errors, it doesn't actually say that IFIN errors is a discard or not. And what you get is you get implementations that go either way. You know, some that report IFIN errors even if they're discarded and even if they're not. And if you look, I think trying to get the nuance into all of the places where these things are defined versus actually having a central place where we say, if you want to report packet loss, this is how you do it, I think is both, you know, cleaner and less effort.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to take away from, I think the information model is good. I think that's great. I think the data model is okay. I guess I still have a preference of, I would like to try and fix up the existing definitions and get them tighter, even if they're going to change them. So where it's not clear, I think of an error as being the packet's definitely dropped. So maybe that's just our implementation. So I think some of those, getting the clarity in.
Other vendors don't, you know, honestly. So I think if it was, I think it's quite a big task to go back and fix all the places where this needs fixing. Plus there are gaps. You know, there are some of them. It's not a question of fixing; it's a question of adding new concepts. Just don't even exist. So,
okay. And then the last comment would be is to be very careful on the definitions of the counters now, to look through the other existing ones and make sure that they're very precise. Like on the L2 counters, whether you include any like FCS bytes or not, and things like that, because again, there's variation there.
Yes.
So so be careful there.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rob.
So, John, you have 1 minute really, because we are starting to run back up against time. If you can run through this fairly quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't seem to have control, but if you could go to the next slide.
I just gave you control back.
There we go. Thank you. So I think we discovered I think we discussed a lot of this already. So what we've done is we've got a common use case, which is we have discards that reported at the device level, at the interface level. We detect they're anomalous, but then we need to understand what flows may be causal to the problems. So in order to do that, we need to be able to correlate the device or interface level discards with flow level, corresponding flow level discards. And for that, we need consistent classification of discards across device and interface level and flow, and that was the point of the information model. And so we have done that by redefining a new information element for IPFix, which essentially takes the leaves of the information model and encodes those as a new information element. The only subtlety perhaps here are two subtleties. One is that where data is already available, information is already available in other information elements, we haven't duplicated it. And the other is we've included parent nodes in the Yang tree so that it's possible to expose both aggregated or classify both aggregated and more fine-grained data. They're the two, I guess, key design decisions we took here, and interested in feedback from the group about those decisions. The alternative approach that we could have taken is actually just to completely express the full tree from the information model, which it's still possible to do. We've got enough space in a single information element to do that. And I think my last slide was the slide around information model, data model, which I think we've already discussed.
Mahesh, so I might be a little confused still about what all is included in the flow discards, because one particular, and you kind of mentioned QoS, I think on the slide before this. Do we have a particular requirement from our customers to say that if a packet is discarded because of a policy, like QoS policy to drop for policing rate, would that be something that would be counted under flow discards, or is there a need for a separate counter called policy discards?
So I see it as two orthogonal things that correlate. So let me give you a concrete example. Let's assume that we've got excess TTL discards. That would be reported at the device or interface level as TTL discards, but on aggregate. Then you want to ask the question of which flow is causal to this. So in terms of flow level discard reporting, if you're then per flow defining that the discards are TTL related, same class essentially in that information element, then you can correlate the two. That doesn't mandate that that is reported, of course, but if they are, then it gives you that ability to correlate between the two.
Okay, but I think a policy level discard may not be tied to a particular flow, and that's why I'm having issue with putting a discard like that under flow.
So your question is whether the policy parts should go under flow. I think certainly some platforms would support that, so I wouldn't want to exclude that. I think it would, but all of them are optional in terms of implementation. So I think if we discard a packet in a flow because of it violates an ACL, it is possible to capture which flow is being discarded.
Okay, maybe we can take this offline, but I was suggesting that maybe actually not put it under flow, but have a separate counter for policy discards.
Yeah, sorry, John, we really have to move forward or we're going to cut off ops area. I think one thing we should take this question to the list that you've got up on your slides to see how the working group wants to move forward. This work is not currently adopted. What is adopted is your information model, and we've been talking about that versus the data model. So we have to figure out what is the right way to move forward with this. And then also some of Mahesh's comments then can come to the list.
Yeah.
But thank you for presenting, John, and the discussion.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
I think, Yao, you've got two presentations because you've been tapped to do both the quick and
Hello, I'm Yao from City, and I present this draft instead of channeling. And the first draft is export of quick information in IPFix. So as we know, Quick is a UDP-based transport protocol and is widely used in various network services. But how to collect and export quick information in forwarding traffic is not yet defined. So this document defines several information elements to export quick information via IPFix messages. So here is a brief review of the 8 information elements defined in this document and the corresponding fields in the quick message. So I'm going to go through it quickly. So first we have quick header flag, and we have information elements for quick version and quick destination connection ID and quick source connection ID. So the next are the information elements for quick supported version in the version negotiation packet and quick packet number. And the last two information elements for the payload. So the first is quick frame type, and the second is quick stream ID. So we request more reviews to improve the draft, whether we are define the information elements for the quick fields correctly, and are this enough, and welcome any feedbacks and comments. Thank you.
Thank you for this. One question, I reviewed the draft and I was not too clear. There is the long header, the short header. I'm not sure what you're expecting, because yes, you could have all the IPFIX information elements, but you expect to have two flows, you expect to have one flows, and this is where I was missing a bit of information.
So you're suggesting we add some more information about why we are defining.
And which use case you're solving with that, and typically, you know, you've got the, I was explaining yesterday, right, that I'm not a quick expert, but there is a long header first and then the short header, and then how you combine information between those two, because for me, these are two different flows, right? So what do you report out of the first one and the second one?
Okay, so whether this header is short or long are indicated by the flag fields. So I think they won't be used together, but we'll add some detailed use cases or descriptions in the next version. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Med had a comment in chat. Just read it because we're running out of time.
Okay.
When you get back,
Okay.
but I think it's a very great, valid comment.
Okay.
So I have to click a lot to get your next slides up.
Yeah, and this draft is about export of SRv6 path segment identifier in IPFIX. So as we know, we already have an RFC 9487 for IPFIX for SRv6. So for the SRv6 element, currently we have two information elements. So both information elements encode the segment list in the SRH, starting from the segment list 0. So, but the whole segment list is not always the best key identifier. The first reason is when there are too many seeds in the list, the size of IPFIX message would be large. So it is inefficient to collect and analysis the flow records. The second is if different SRv6 policies use the same segment list for packet steering. It is difficult to distinguish the traffic flow of different SR policies because they are using the same list. So the third is an SRv6 parse may not be identified by the segment list carried in the SRH if we use a reduced mode. So in this case, the first set is not present in the SRH. And so what is SRv6 path segment identifier is already proposed and accepted by Spring. So it is defined to identify an SRv6 parse, and it is encoded as the last entry in the segment list in SRH with the P flag set. So what we are doing is this document is to just define a new information element for SRv6 PSID. So it is a 120-bit IPFIX address that presents an SRv6 PSID. So how to operate? So in order to generate flow records with PSID included, though the metering process needs to understand the P flag. It does not have to support the function of path segment. So it just to understand what P flag means. So the third consideration is only when the P flag is set, then the metering process can capture the last entry in the SRH to get the PSID. And the third is the analysis node should be aware of which SR parse the PSID identifies. Yeah, we also present this draft in the spring session to get more reviews from them, and we request feedbacks, comments. That's all. Thank you.
I think, yeah, I appreciate how fast you were able to work through these. Thank you. I asked Med to send his comment on the previous draft to the list, and thank you. please, any comments on this? Thank you for starting the discussion. Please go to the list so we can give ops area time. Thank you very much, Yale.
Thank you.
So that takes us out of ops AWG into ops area. If our 3 ADs, incoming and outgoing, would come up, we will relinquish our control of the stage. I can keep sharing if you'd like. Should I do the quick introduction? Yeah. Hi all. Get out of my chair. You're in my chair. What are we going to do? Right. There we go. You should stay.
So, hi all. I believe everybody already knows Med, but if not, hi everyone, this is Med. He will be taking over. And I just want to say I've really enjoyed OPSAWG. It's been a working group that I've been participating in for a really long time. And this might be the longest we've ever spoken in the ops area part of OPSAWG and ops area. There we go. So I will hereby hand it over to Med.
Yeah, I cannot sit yet, so I will wait for Wednesday. So yeah, so thank you, Warren, for I would say the introduction. So and first, I would like we thank Warren for I would say the many years for service and what he has done for ops area. So. That's really great. And what is really is that he left something which is very clean. Not a lot of, I would say, documented in the queue, a lot of stuff. So he done the, I would say, good job, at least for the last mile. So I appreciate that. So.
Okay. Any questions? Open mic, 5, 4, 3, 2. Oh. Oh, yeah, okay, that whole part of completely forgetting your. As you can see, I've already checked out. Take control? Yes, perfect. Leave it, please.
Hi everyone, I'm going to be presenting the AnyMops workshop report with Wes and I. So we did this workshop, I'm sure you guys know, it was well advertised. We did this workshop after 22 years, and from the past workshop we had a lot to live up to. It really was impactful. With this workshop, our first thanks to all the program committee, which had some IAB members as well as the members from the ops community. They are listed there. Thank you for all the work, all the calls, and all the things. And of course, Secretariat, which helped us in running the workshop as well. The key objective for our workshops was reviewing the outcome of the last workshop, identifying what are the operational barriers that still exist, exploring brand new requirements, and developing a sort of plan of action and recommendation from the people who participated at the workshop to the community, and that's actually the community that's got to do the real work. We did identify that we need to do some kind of outreach to make sure that the workshop is of some use. So we planned it as a part of our workshop proposal itself, that before we start the workshop, we'll go to all the operator communities and reach out to them, ask them to participate either in the workshop or provide us with feedback, even offline in forms of surveys and other ways by just talking to the people who are taking part in the workshop. We got really good feedback, especially from the Nano community. We also went to RIPE, BlackNock, AutoCon. And after the workshop got over, we still continue to do this kind of outreach because we want people to come and participate and still share their experience by going to Apricot as well as Nanog after the workshop with some of the things that I'll be talking about today. At the starting, this was a survey done. Survey was very interesting. Go look at the survey output. It's part of this presentation at later. It had some very interesting things that were revealed to us. And sometimes when we are so focused in our protocol work and actually developing, it is also kind of nice to go back and see what is actually getting deployed and what are the clear issues that are there, what is being successful and what's not. So some of them were very surprising sometimes when we are too deep in Yang and NetConf, but going there and finding out was kind of fun, but good results. I'll not delve into it because there's a limited time today. All our materials is online, so if you are not there, all the position papers, all the slides, all the recordings, everything is available. Go check it out. And this group, I'm sure, is definitely interested. There were 20 position papers from 53 authors. We had 16 expression of interest, so that was a pretty good number. We were very happy with that. We had the job of a PC to breaking it down into 3 sessions. This was not as easy because people had thoughts about the past, present, and future, but we still had to put them in neat bucket. We tried our best and said that let's focus first on what had worked, where are we, get a sense of our history in a sense, then identify what are the problems and requirements that are upcoming, which were not there 20 years ago when we were doing this kind of workshop, and then what's the future direction? What are the new set of solutions out there, and what concrete steps we can give back to the IETF community from the workshop. And at the end, Wes did an amazing job at sort of collecting and herding everybody into some common conclusions that we can all agree on, and that Wes will present at the end. So let's go over the 3 days. This is just a very, very quick summary. Go read the report, go read the actual material where this exists to get a better sense of it, but I'm just giving you a readout and inviting you to look at our actual material and the report. So the starting of the workshop, Jürgen, who was the author of RFC 3535, our last IAB workshop report, started this workshop as well by sharing his experience from the past workshop and what was our journey. He also had a direction for our future, clearly saying that network management needs to be more declarative, composable, reproducible, and verifiable. We had Ian from DT going over their perspective of how Yang has been successful. So they claim that they have been using it. It has worked well in some cases, but there are challenges. So laying out those challenges. And one of the things that many folks said that the lack of open source, lack of reference implementation, lack of easy tools, that's been one of the big challenges that many folks identified. Wes then took us back into history and talked about the Net SNMP tool and how it was simplicity and usability of that tool that it led to its mass use, and how some of the new things that we have developed has failed the #1 requirement that we identified in RFC 3535, which was ease of use. And somehow we have lost our way in some ways, and we need to relook at this again. Something that we were not thinking 20 years ago was IoT, but a lot of our network management stuff is being used in IoT, and it's been has been quite successful, in fact, in that environment. So in fact, a success case for us is how network management and IoT has a pretty good ecosystem out there. Rob made a plea to rethink something that he has done in the past in IETF as well, when these discussions happen in the IETF community. Again, highlighting what are the things that are missing in the IETF process point of view, maybe our slowness, the way we need to iterate faster, or way we think only about single model or a single component rather than thinking of the overall system and how it's going to deploy and how it's going to scale. So those lessons were highlighted, which I think we all take to heart because those are true. The open discussion led to identifying of issues like we still have to rely on old techniques of CLI and screen scraping because the features that are being used, not everything is available in Yang model or via our NetConf protocol at this moment of time. So you do need to support both, and that leads to way more complexity. Everybody identified, and this group knows this well, that our IETF process and way which we develop Yang models, where some models which were started multiple years ago, which are still not RFC because of the way that we do run our process. Lack of tooling continues to be the most major barrier for network management. They want to do it, but what is the easiest tool with which they can start playing around, getting their hands dirty? It's such a big transition step, and that always leads to delay in using the latest network management tools that are available there. And whether this will work at large scale, what will be the performance issues? Those things is something that we haven't discussed as much in our groups. We focus mostly on the feature and this, but for an operator community, the scaling is one of the key things that they do care about, and we need to find ways to handle that within our IETF process as well. And just the steep learning curve was also highlighted during this talk. Operators struggle to move away from CLI. We covered this. The versioning is helping, but is it meeting all the requirements that's there? The idea of system level APIs, rather than focusing on a very single thing that we currently do on low level models, we need to move up the chain and thinking of more system level APIs. These were some of the points that were highlighted. Doesn't mean that everybody in the workshop agreed with them. I'm just capturing some of the key things that were discussed in the open discussion. The proliferation of protocols and language, we have just way too many options. And then it's not just netconf, we have other protocols, BMP, IPFix, and how do we make sure that the data that we are collecting from all these different sources is giving a cohesive view of how our network is. Those things are sort of missing. In the second day, which was the present discussion, here the idea was operators coming and discussing their requirements as of now, and what of them are new that IETF needs to focus on. So from DT, we get the idea that configuration is okay, we have done well there, but monitoring is something that is missing. So until I know that I can validate what I have configured is working well, I'm not happy, and it's not a full solution from network management point of view. So we need to get our acts together and focus on monitoring and validating verifiable aspects as well. Jamie focused on what are the challenges and complexity, especially in an SDN platform. So not looking at from the device, but going up a layer in orchestrator. At the SDN platform, what is the complexity of managing multiple devices? Some are legacy, some are new, different vendors, multiple models across those vendors, multiple standards model. We have OpenConfig, we have IETF models. So this complexity was something that was highlighted. Then we have a document in NMOP working group, which is collecting all the brand new requirements. So we had a presentation of various operators have been working on collecting and discussing and prioritizing which are the topmost requirements. So this could be one of the key outputs of the future work. And I hope the authors of that document got really good feedback during the workshop as well. And this work can continue in the NMOP working group. Thomas from Swisscom, who has presented at NMOPS and other places multiple times, highlighted that let's take YangPush as an example and how an iterative process, the hackathons, the various things that we have tried in NMOP working group are a push in the right direction, but how it can be done for more of the works that we are doing within the IETF, and focus on more agile, iterative, focus on giving MVP of sorts of in our protocol and models both. Transitioning to Yang remains a challenge. Okay, I want to do it, but the whole transitioning just takes too much effort. I don't have a clear direction how to start. There is difficult in mapping vendor specific as well as standards model. There is just too much divergence out there of people not following the standards or doing their own thing because they have their own vendor specific features out there. For that, they have to create a vendor specific model. It's just a mix of things out there. And supporting both of them leads to more complexity in our system. Even when we try to map between service model and device model, that becomes complicated. And not having something easy to look at, open source reference implementation, somebody who has tried to do that or given clear steps, that is one of the barriers for adoption of our work. Compliance and interoperability testing was brought up, that yes, IETF does it, but if vendors are not actually following it, I'm not going to use it, which is something that exists. This is something that maybe IETF cannot do directly, but it's something that we need to identify as well as think of ways in which we can assist the people who can do this. I brought up the multiple models. So as you can see, there was a little bit of the topics bubbling up of something that we discussed on the previous day, coming back when we are discussing even the present work. Looking at the time, I'll just go faster because we need to go through the takeaway. So Benoit talked about the knowledge sharing graph, which is something that has been discussed in NMOP as well. Kent gave us some clear direction where, according to Kent, where we should go. We should focus on RESTConf, focus on JSON, Yang push light, thinking of off-box data model and protocol adapters rather than focusing on implementing a standard model right there on the device. Similarly, Rob had ideas on how we can improve our process, and we are hoping that people with these ideas would actually come and do the change that we discussed during those workshops. The absence of NMD and open config was brought up, and that was a good discussion point. Building consensus takes time, but at the same time, we want to do things in an iterative and quicker fashion. So how do we balance the two things that we have within our IETF process? That's a key thing, and that's going to be the biggest challenge for us when we are thinking of these kind of process. Experimentation. Idea that whether we should have just a single protocol, that was discussed. Of course, there was no agreement on that. And off-box adapters was something that was brought up multiple times. Again, this is something that I think Wes will also covered. We need to think of how the current way of putting our Yang models in RFCs which do not change. Is that the right way for us to do it? What are the way in which we can process experiment? Can we do within our ops area some process experimentation for that? Those are the things that this group needs to come and discuss as well. And we do acknowledge that workshop did not cover everything. There are way more things to cover. This was just 3 days. There are various things that we missed out, and we want to acknowledge that in our report as well. And with that, let me pass to you.
Thank you, Dhruv. So one of the things that the IAB has done in a number of our workshops that we think works well is to try and at the very end go, okay, what did we all agree on? Right? What do we actually have more than even consensus? What do we have strong consensus about? And what ends up happening every time is we remove a bunch of stuff and move it to the needs to be worked on in the future. But we did come to some conclusions, one of which is that the current management protocols still fail sort of the ease of use requirement, right? And that's hard. We know how hard the models are, no matter what language they're in, they're just big, complex models. So that's not surprising. The ecosystem is still very fragmented. We have very different tools, we have very different models, we have very different protocols, and trying to get them all to work together, if you're an operator like I am, it takes some effort to actually build up an operational environment. Documentation is still lacking to some extent. I actually think it's come a long way. I actually think Yang has really helped in that regard to try and document, what is in a device. But things are still missing both on the model side as well as how to actually use the devices and get them configured and things like that. So these are sort of things that people agreed we should continue to work on. Transitioning between network management frameworks is challenging. This shouldn't be a shock. We've all moved from IPv4 to IPv6 already. It went just smooth sailing. Same sort of thing for network management, right? It's really hard to make major changes over time. A model-driven network management framework, though, however, really is a success when it works, right? When you actually get the models and they're all agreeing and they all work, it's fantastic. You just have to get to that point and hope that you don't have some odd device that still requires Telnet to, port 25 or whatever. Not 25. More easily usable, 23. More easily usable network management tools are still needed. I don't think this one's ever going to be complete, right? It's like you always need better and better tools, especially as you get more and more usage over time. So there's some protocol conclusions. NetConf and Yang are not used for monitoring. We knew this. I made a presentation many years ago that we really needed to bring monitoring into NetConf and Yang, but it doesn't do yet. They don't quite have full coverage even on the configuration front. and that we still need some polling-based solutions. Push-based solutions are often really desired, but they're not yet coming. We hope that NetConf is sort of moving that way, especially with RESTConf. There's some modeling conclusions. Again, Yang models can be too complex. Multi-vendor compatibility is still a challenge. And even vendor-specific features are not always implemented in a modeling framework in the first place. So you still end up having to use some other, mechanism. And then finally, people really wanted service-level modeling, not just, here's the little tiny device kind of thing, but, how do I configure this whole service as a service itself? That actually was talked about in the previous IAB workshop as well, for that matter. And then network management configuration needs to be verifiable. Right? Once I push the config to the device, or even before I push the config to the device, can I verify that this is actually going to do what I want, actually going to work, and not break the configuration on the device? From a standardization point of view, we need a rapid model development procedure. How can we turn around Yang models or whatever it might be in a faster way than we do in the IETF? We need, we need to figure out sort of the minimal set that everybody should implement, and then allow the extra features to happen in separate venues. We need a better focus on scalability. How do you scale to 10,000 plus devices or 100,000 plus devices? And then, so what's next, right? The IAB workshop sort of act as a spark. It actually, in the previous one, really is where NetConf and Yang really spun out of. So we're trying to figure out where do we go from here. There's an initial workshop draft report. I would encourage everybody to read it. This is like the highlight speed run of the entire document. We're still taking comments on it. And I was just twiddling in it 5 minutes ago, but it's a great thing to read at this point, and we hope to publish it sometime in the near future. And remember that this is all, we'll see you again in 20 years, right? The workshop report is a standalone stopping point. Network management never, ever, ever ends. If I knew that 30 years ago, I may have changed my career. I don't know. So please give us feedback. There's the workshop report, and I think this is done. We are actually over time as well. Any questions? I don't know if the chairs want to limit us in time at all.
Thank you very much, Wes. Drew. Yeah, one point really about the output there. I actually am very, very happy to see that there's been an emphasis on compatibility between vendors, particularly for Yang models. I've been saying for a long time to them that they need to think about interoperability, and we need to treat this as any other type of protocol interoperability. And I've been banging this drum for years, so I'm really grateful to see it. The one thing I would hope to not warn against, but kind of caveat to the suggestion about maybe doing faster developed by GitHub is that will hinge entirely on how good the maintainers are.
Yeah.
And swift, efficient, and consistent maintenance across that's already very hard. And
so two really quick points that address, I think, all of your thoughts, right? One of the things we dived heavily into in the workshop was just that. How do you do rapid turnaround that has maintainability and you can keep pushing out new things? When you do that, and every vendor has their own thing, that becomes, of course, hard. So one of the other suggestions that got a fair amount of traction was we really need a conversion mechanism so that every device can sort of have a slightly different version of a model, and something enables a conversion from what the management station believes it wants. Yeah, you're smiling too, because that problem's really hard, right? But the inverse problem is also really hard. How do you get every device to support their side? So yes, we've got to figure out, that's a future work item that actually is discussed in the document. So please do look at the document.
I'll certainly give you versioning is very difficult to think
Yep,
about. So.
Very difficult. Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. I've discussed this with Mahesh. Sorry, you have a little less time than you thought. You have 6 minutes. Go. You're our last topic in the ops area section.
Thank you very much. Is the audio okay?
You can control the slides, and we can hear you and we can see you.
Perfect. So I was asked to present the open source project by Identify, who the main goal is to convert Yang into pyventic models. So just as a quick, what I normally see as a network automation engineer is that people are using Jinja for generating the payloads when we're working with Yang models, and this hurts in my heart. So the idea was, how can we make this better? How can we make Yang more consumable, if you want to speak? So looking at the ecosystem, I think there is not much in the open source. We heard it before, the lack of open source tooling. There is Pyang Bind. It was not maintained for a long time. It is now, I think, maintained again. There is YGOT from the Open Config organization, but I believe they only support Yang 1.0. And there was this Yang development kit. It's not maintained anymore as well. And of course, there are some scripts. So what I actually want when I want to work with Yang models, I want to have it consumable. I want to have it easy to use. I want to use all the features I normally use in software engineering with the IDE, auto-completion, error check, type hints. But this is pretty hard, in my opinion, or I'm missing something. And of course, I want to serialize, deserialize the data. So that is how the whole thing started. It started 2022 when I proposed a midterm project at the University Eastern Switzerland of Applied Science. I found 2 students who made the first version, the prototype. Here you could also find the documentation, but I will be just fast. So now we have an open source project, Pydentify. It's on GitHub. All the information are here. There was a lot of discussion in the network automation forum, and in the beginning, of course, some ranting about Yang and the complexity and how hard it is to consume it in the right way. We have a first version of an experimental Python bindings from Nokia. So Roman Dodin, he did use Pydentify to create all the Pydentic models for the SR Linux operation system. There's also a video with a demo. I will go quick. I hope I can share my screen. Sorry, I'm not an IETF guy, so. But in the way, I hope you get the idea that we want to share the intent that we can. Somehow it's not working.
I'm allowing you. I'm saying you can.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of error messages. Yeah. Anyway, maybe the video is better and the time is anyway tight. But what you would have seen is that you can use Pydentify as a command similar to Pyang. Pydentify is actually just a Pyang plugin, and in the way we can generate JSON schema and we can generate Pydentic models. I lost the control over the slides. Can you go next?
Yep. No, I'll give them back. You have them.
Right. Thanks. So there's a lot of challenges. Of course, Yang, as you know, is quite complex, has a lot of features. Definitely the context-aware validation is more or less not possible to solve for me or for the project with all the must and if statements. Because we make the midterm step with JSON schema, we can only support stuff that is in the JSON schema available. We use then data model code generation to generate the Pydentic, so a lot of open source projects. There are a lot of issues with the perfect presentation of some data type like bits, decimal, 6 to 4. The regex is a little bit of a pain, but I think time is up. If anyone wants to talk about this, I'm happy to talk in the Network Automation Forum, Slack, or I'm reachable by email, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you want. I'm kind of available everywhere. and happy to answer questions. Thank you.
We have at least one sometime, and Wes is in the queue.
Yeah, thanks very much. This is Wes Herdicker, USC, and on the IAB. You're solving some of the problems I just gave a presentation about. I love this. If you could give a percentage for like how much it works or how complete it is, were you able to come up with a number?
Feature complete. Whew. I'm never happy with the work, but I would say 75. So we were able to render all the models from Nokia S or Linux. We did not test with other vendors in the same scale. And some part is workaround, like the identiref, I think is just a string at the moment. So there's a lot of improvements, but you can work with it.
I think that's great. I agree with Wes. It sounds like you're solving some of the problems that were raised. But what am I? I'm just a chair, and this is the AD section. But we are done. Thank you, Urs, for your presentation. Thank you, Warren, for all your service to Ops. And we will punish you more in IAB, I guess. And thank you all for attending the Ops AWG Ops area portion of the IETF 122. Enjoy the rest of the conference.